Hi, my name is Nate, and I'm a solutions architect here at Intuit. And welcome to our QuickBooks Webhooks CloudEvents migration prompt walkthrough. And what this is, it's an AI-powered workflow that helps developers migrate their QuickBooks Webhook handler from the legacy payload format to the new CloudEvents format. It is pretty straightforward, and so how the prompt actually works, it'll scan your current webhook handler to see exactly where the old payload is used. It then provides side-by-side code snippets showing you how to switch to the cloud events. And so the prompt, it will not apply any code changes unless the user explicitly tells the agent to do so. So you will just review the changes, apply them, and then move on to the next task. And as you can see here on the slide, the prompt is available on our Intuit Developer GitHub prompt library repo. And just a quick review of what is actually changing. We can see here on the left side, this is the old legacy format. And so this payload is typically going to be delivered as a single JSON object containing the events notification. And then on the right, we have our new cloud events payload. And this is going to be delivered as an array. And you can see here, it does have the spec version filled. Now, let's actually go into the prompt project and see how the file architecture is set up. Now that we are actually inside of the prompt project, we can see here on the left that it has a total of 4 different files, starting with our instructions. And so the instructions file, this is where you're going to see a step-by-step workflow, how the prompt actually works, and different troubleshooting steps for the prompt. Moving on to the prompt template file, and this is going to be the actual AI prompt. It contains the full task structure with the placeholder variables written as double curly braces, and we can see that here with the SDK source. So all variables will be in those double curly braces. And so this file, you won't edit the file directly. It is reusable and it is a master template that works across the different programming languages. And so with our prompt config.json, this is going to be our next file, and this is going to be the single source of truth for all the configurable values. It does have 2 types of entries. The first are going to be the shared string values that are the same across all the languages. And this will be things like the webhooks documentation URL that we can see here. And then we also have some of the signature headers. So that will be our first string values that we have in this file. And our second type of entries are going to be the actual language map objects. And so this is where each key is a language name like our Java, our .NET, PHP, Node.js, and Python. And then the value is what it gets injected into the prompt for that language. We can see here at the top that it by default it starts with Java, but you can change this right here to one of our supported languages that we see down there. So this is exactly how you tell the merge script what language to generate the prompt for. And so you can also change it down in the terminal with a command line argument, which I will show you once we finally do run the prompt. The last file that we want to go over is going to be our merge prompt file. And this right here, this is what is going to actually build the script. You run it with Node.js. It'll read in the prompt config.json, picks the right value for each variable based on which language you selected, and it replaces every one of those double curly braces variables in the prompt template, and it'll produce a file called the webhooks migration.md. And so you might be asking why a 3-file structure, and the main reason is to avoid like any hard coding. So the template is your master logic. The config handles the variables, which is like the SDKs, the languages, and the different URLs. And so when something does change, you just update the single line in the config instead of searching and replacing values inside the actual prompt. So this makes it faster, safer, and keeps every language in sync. Now let's actually run the script and see the full prompt. The first thing that we are going to want to do is make sure that we are in the correct directory. So as you can see here, we are in the webhooks migration folder. So this is the correct directory. And so what we will do is we will run it with node, and then we will call our merge prompt.js file. As I was stating earlier, we can change the command line argument for the language. So if we wanted to run PHP here, we could do that as well, .NET. And so by default, this will refer to Java. And so we're going to go ahead and run that here. And what we can see, we do get some feedback in the terminal. And so we'll see resolved variables. We have 13 and 32 replacements. And then if we go down, we'll see unresolved variables, and we can see here 0. So the config file, everything was compiled successfully, and then we can see here our actual prompt file. And so with the prompt file, what we have here is we have different tasks. And our task 0 that we have is going to be actually like our gatekeeper. And so before any code analysis is happening, it does 2 checks. It first verifies every reference linked is resolved, and it also double checks any curly brace token. And if they're still in the prompt, it'll stop right there and ask you to fix it. And so if there is any problems, definitely check the instructions.md for any troubleshooting help. That will cover most of the use cases. And so the second thing that it does scan for, it scans for the project for the build files. It detects the actual language framework, and then it cross-checks against your config. And so for this instance, we can see because it is Java, it will detect something like Java 21, Spring Boot, in that build file as well. And so once that task is finished, the AI assistant will ask you if you're ready to move on to the next task, which is going to be our task 1. And this is actually the analyze handler. And so what this is doing, this is going to map the entire webhook flow before touching a single line of code. It looks for 6 specific things. It's going to look for the endpoint, the signature verification, the parsing logic, legacy field access, also the downstream processing, and the content type handling. And so every finding that it does find, it will give a file name and a line number. And so this is what structures the AI response, keeping it organized and verifiable instead of just giving you a wall of useless text. And then just like we saw in task 0, the AI agent will prompt you to move to the next task. And so once you are done with task 1, we'll move down to task 1.5, which is going to be the routing. And this is how the AI classifies the code base. And it'll classify it into 3 different states. The first one is going to be the legacy only, which triggers the full migration. And then if it does detect any cloud events only, it'll just verify and confirm without doing any code changes or rebuilding. And then the third thing is if there is no webhook handler, it'll stop the process entirely. So this tool is just for a migration engine. And so this prevents the AI from wasting any time before it actually starts to do its analysis. Now moving on to the next task, which is going to be our task 2, and this is the actual migration. And so this is going to be where most of the core work is done. And so it follows 4 steps. It replaces their legacy parser with the CloudEvents SDK. It remaps any legacy fills, and then it updates any downstream logic, and then it also fixes any content type restrictions. And so every change is presented with a before and after code snippet with a file name, the line number, and a quick explanation. So you will review the code, apply it, and confirm to move forward. Or if you explicitly tell the AI assistant to apply these changes, it will do that as well. And then moving on to task 3, which is going to be the testing. And so it will provide 9 copy and pasteable tests, which we won't go over all of them. But the AI does generate an OpenSSL command to commute the HMC signature from your specific token so you can run them independently. And so it will check for any signature failures, empty bodies, malformed JSON, and then it finishes with a live sandbox test to trigger the real events from the developer portal. And so you can see the full flow of all of those tests there. Finally, what we have here is we have our task 4, which is going to be the rollout. And so this is going to be the production ready checklist. Are you ready to deploy the code? Do we need to enable the cloud events in the portal? And so we can see here with the cloud events, you do have to toggle on a switch in our Intuit developer portal. And so there's a couple things that you will want to double check for. Whatever environment you are working for, you will have to switch and toggle on which environment you are looking to test or to run in production. And so the toggle is going to be right down here. You're going to want to make sure it shows blue in the background for the new webhooks events to actually go through. And now coming back to our actual prompt file, the last section is going to be the AI guardrails. And so we place the guardrails at the very end intentionally because as AI models pay the most attention to the beginning at the end of a prompt. And so these 7 constraints that we see here keep the AI on track. So most importantly, it is forbidden from hallucinating SDK methods. everything must come from the official source repo. So if the AI is ever missing a piece of the puzzle, it is instructed to stop and ask rather than guessing. Now let's actually go into the full migration and see how it works with a webhooks project open. And now that we have our webhooks project open, the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure you have one of your files selected. And as we see over here, we have our webhooks controller file. And then what we will actually do is we're going to paste our full prompt over into the AI assistant. And so as we can see over here and to the right, we have that full file that was generated. And so the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to run this, and it's going to stop at the task 0 after its analysis. And then we can go over that and we'll see what we get back. And so as we can see here over on the right, it is running the task 0. It is detecting any framework detection, verifying all the URLs. And as we can see also with the AI assistant, it is going through its thought process, the step-by-step of the prompt that we just barely went through. And so now what it is checking for, it's checking for the application config, and it's verifying the views for the field usage. So the prompt has finished task 0, in which we can see here it detected Java 21, Spring Boot, and our Gradle file. It also matched up the SDK and made sure it was on the latest available webhooks handler with our CloudEvents. I've gone ahead and already ran the task 1, which is going to be the webhook handler itself, and it found the webhook endpoint, which we can see there. It also found the signature verification. And then our payload deserialization, it detected that that's legacy only. And then number 4, we can see our field access, where it has all of our different legacy fields, the realm ID, name ID, etc. And then number 5, what we have here is going to be our downstream processing. And so there has been some disconnects here, which is on purpose. We want to make sure that the prompt can find any disconnects with that downstream process. And so what we will do later on is we will have the prompt actually, fix these different issues. Now let's go on to our next task. The next task, which is our task 1.5, we can see as we went over the prompt, it's the state detection, detected only legacy, no cloud events. And so now what it's going to do is go to our task 2, which is actually going to implement the cloud events parsing. So we can see here, it gives us a suggestion for change 1, and this is going to be the Cloud Events Webhook Parser. And this top file that we see here is going to be the changes that it is suggesting. But then if we scroll down a little bit more, we can actually see our before and after. So the first one is going to be the before, what you initially had in your code base. And then now down here is going to be the suggestions for that cloud events migration. And so each file will have its own before and after code snippet on what is suggested to change. And I do want to reiterate that the AI will not make any code changes unless explicitly told so. And then once you are satisfied with any of the changes that you have made, we will go down to our task 3, which is going to be the testing and verification. And we can see here that there is copy and paste curl commands that you can use for different various testings, signature, empty JSON bodies, malformed JSON bodies, things of that nature. And so it will run through the tests, and then once that is done, it will have the final test, which is going to be the sandbox end to end, and it'll give you directions on how to do that. And then finally, what we do have is our task 4 rollout. And so as we stated before, this is going to be the double checking before we actually do roll the code out to production. And then if we keep scrolling past the production rollout, we'll see a summary of files change. And what we can see here in this actual project, there were 7 different files that were changed. And then it'll also give you the type of change over here on the right. So for instance, in our service webhooks storage service, we can see that it replaced the parser. So before, our method was the webhook event, and now it has migrated over to the webhooks cloud events method. So depending on what language or framework you are using, this will look a little bit different. The thing that will remain the same is going to be, it will always give a before and after code snippet without actually ever applying that unless explicitly told to do so. And so with that, that is the full prompt walkthrough with an actual webhooks project open. And so what we went over the analysis, we went over the code changes, we went over the different tests, and the actual rollout plan. So if your app is still using the legacy payload, you want to make sure you run this merge script, specify which language you are using, paste that into the AI assistant, and then follow the different tasks. And once you are good with the task, let the AI assistant know, and then move on to the next task until you actually come to the end of the prompt. And that does conclude the full demo. And since this prompt is hosted on our public repository, I would encourage the community to help us keep it current. If you have any questions or want to extend the tool, please open up a GitHub issue. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a wonderful day.